In the late Middle Ages, there lived in Germany a remarkable scholar with a reputation to have unraveled nature's mysteries and to be able to employ his knowledge in wondrous and magical ways. Some regarded him as a skilled alchemist who had acquired his powers through diligent work. Others said he was only a trickster, who was more a master of sleight of hand than of alchemy. But most eventually came to regard him as a conjurer who had made a pact with the devil, exchanging his soul in return for knowledge and power. The mysterious scholar was Dr. Johann Faust, and the many legends which grew up about him captured the imaginations of writers, poets, and composers in succeeding generations. Half a century after his death, there was published in Germany a book comprising of legends, The History of Johann Faust, by Johann Spies, which soon appeared also in English and French versions. Late in the 16th century, the English playwright Christopher Marlowe wrote a book on Faust based on these legends. After that, countless others took up the Faust theme, the theme of man striving to exceed his ordained bounds, seeking knowledge beyond that allotted to others. The most noted writer in this vein was Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, the first part of whose long dramatic poem, Faust, was published in 1808, drawing primarily on Goethe's work. There were operas composed based on Faust throughout the 19th century and well into the 20th. Symphonies, poems, plays, and novels dealing with the Faust legend continue to appear. The subject evidently resonates with something deep in the European soul. In fact, one may easily see a precursor to the Faust legend in that of Odin, whose quest for truth and understanding led him to give up one of his eyes and to be hanged for 9 days from the world tree. In many versions of the Faust legend, various elements are emphasized, but the persistent theme is the quest of exceptional men for an understanding of life and nature, the reaching out for a new level of existence, for a fuller development of latent powers. It's from this persistent theme, rather than from the semi-historical account of the life of Dr. Johann Faust, or from any one of the fictional works using his name, that we draw the meaning attached to the adjective Faustian today. The word refers to a spiritual tendency in the race, which has shown such fascination down through the ages with the idea behind the Faust legend. It describes a fundamental urge to drive latent in the soul of European man, and active in a few exceptional Europeans. The Faustian urge in our race says to us, "Thou shalt not rest or be content, no matter what thy accomplishments. Thou must strive all the days of thy life. Thou must discover all things, know all things, master all things." European man's Faustian urge is quite different from the urge in the Levantine soul to accumulate, to possess, the craving to pile up money beyond all reason, the lust for personal aggrandizement. And it is, of course, antithetical to what might be called the mañana spirit of the Latin peoples, which says to them, enjoy life, don't hurry, you don't need to know what lies beyond the next ridge. It's the source of both our basic restlessness as a race and our basic inquisitiveness. It is what makes adventurers of us, drives us to risk our lives in venues which can bring us no conceivable material benefit, something which is totally foreign to other races, accustomed to judging everything according to its utility only. It is the Faustian urge which has made our race the preeminent race of explorers, which has driven us to scale the highest mountains in lands inhabited by men of other races, who have been content to remain always in the valleys. It is what, more than intellect alone, has made us likewise the preeminent race of scientists, especially in those days before the practice of science became a well-paid profession. It is what sent us to another world, and has us now reaching for the stars. But the Faustian urge is also more than all these things. It raises those imbued with it above the economic men, who, in the eyes of Western politicians and Eastern commissars, of labor bosses and captains of industry, of neoliberal Democrats and conservative Republicans alike, are the sole denizens of the earth. It makes of man more than a mere consumer or producer. It is, more than anything else, the manifestation of the divine man's soul. The opening scene in Goethe's Faust conveys the idea of the Faustian spirit. Faust is a restless scholar who has delved into all of human knowledge, but whose soul remains unslaked, his craving for ultimate truth unabated. Alone in his study, late at night, he gazes with a mixture of awe and desire on the sign of the macrocosms, and he says to himself, "Was it a god who engraved this sign, which stills my inner tumult and fills my heart with joy? With a mysterious force unveils the secret of nature all around me? Where shall I grasp thee, O infinite nature?" But Goethe paints other aspects of his protagonist's character, besides the one we have called Faustian. It may be that a better or at least less ambiguous adjective would be Odyssean or Ulyssian, because the English poet Alfred Tennyson, in one short poem, really strikes closer to the sense of the word that we have to convey than does Goethe, or any of the other writers about the Faust legend. Tennyson's hero's desire is to, quote, follow knowledge like a sinking star, beyond the utmost bound of human thought. To Ulysses, the idea that the world has no boundaries, and there are infinite discoveries that lie ahead. Even in old age, after a much fuller and more eventful life than ordinary men are granted, Ulysses says, it's not too late to seek a newer world. My purpose holds, to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars, until I die. He sees himself as made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to survive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. And just as Goethe's Faust is contrasted with his student servant, the pedantic Wagner, even more strongly and much more concisely, does Tennyson contrast Ulysses with his son Telemachus, a man of slow prudence, centered in the sphere of common duties, and quite lacking in his father's driving spirit. Yet, common usage favors Faustian over Ulyssian, and we should be satisfied with that. From a strictly anthropological viewpoint, we may seek a clue to European man's Faustian tendency in the particulars of his evolutionary development. He was, for 10,000 generations, a hunter in the herds of bison and reindeer and mammoths which roamed the frozen plains of northern Europe during the Ice Ages. We might expect, therefore, that he should show the inquisitiveness that he does, which is the mark of the predator, whether cat or man. But we might also ask why other races which went through a hunting phase do not show it to the same degree. We might expect, because our ancestors followed the herds in their seasonal migrations for so many centuries, owning only the property they could carry on their backs, that they should have acquired the restlessness of the wanderer, while more sedentary races should have become, over the eons, more inclined to accumulation and no less exploration. But again, there have been more southerly nomadic races which seem to have not become imbued with the Faustian spirit. The rigor of the northern climate, the challenge of the ever-changing seasons certainly sharpened the character of our race as strongly as any other factor. Aggressiveness, venturesomeness, boldness were traits which enabled our ancestors to find and exploit every scarce possibility for survival in a harsh and unforgiving environment. But the Mongoloid peoples, who evolved in a similarly harsh environment, seem to have responded somewhat differently to it, and today characterized more by stolidity than venturesomeness. We can only conclude that the Faustian spirit is the consequence of a unique and transitory combination of causative factors, to which a single race was exposed over a period just long enough to affect the necessary genetic transformation and give it a tenuous racial bias. Even in our own race, it manifests itself strongly only in the few who prefer adventure to advantage, accomplishment to acquisition, self-knowledge to self-satisfaction, the conquest of new worlds to the convenience and safety of the old, a true understanding of the absolute to the unquestionability of a narrow orthodoxy. The race which is the bearer of this spirit must, therefore, be doubly careful that its genetic basis is preserved, that it does not become a race solely of lawyers, clerks, laborers, and merchants, but remains a race also of philosophers, explorers, poets, and inventors, of seekers of ultimate knowledge, of strivers toward the perfection which is godhood. When we take the longest viewpoint, we can see that the Faustian spirit, tenuous though it may be, is European man's entire justification for existence.
I will be harvesting my crops. Imagine where you will be, and it will be so. Hold the line! Stay with me! If you find yourself alone, riding in green fields with the sun on your face, do not be troubled, for you are in Elysium, and you're already dead! Brothers, what we do in life echoes in eternity.